We have an interesting conversation coming up in a minute or two. But before that, I really just want to set the scene for what's happening in the regulatory landscape when it comes to the maritime energy transition. The challenges we're facing and what's going on over the next, immediate future, essentially. Well, first of all, on the international stage, we have what's happening at the IMO, obviously. Because at the IMO, we are on the cusp of adopting a set of international greenhouse gas regulations that, once they go through, are going to be very significant in creating those drivers for the uptake of alternative fuels that we are looking for here. We only have to sort out some extremely thorny political questions, as well as fix a lot of technical design features and get them so sorted. And we have to do that by end of MEPC 83, which is just before Easter. So, no pressure on those of us who actually are participating at the IMO meetings. It's doable, but it's going to take a little while. The second bit is what's happening in the EU, of course. There we have the ETS last year, as mentioned, and we have the Fuel EU Maritime this year, and we still have clarifications coming in. We will have the potential of amendments in the not too distant future, pending some reviews we'll be touching on. So lots of things happening with the EU as well. Finally, as an example of national initiatives, we have the UK. This is your kind of post-Brexit bonus, if you will, where the UK is looking at setting up its own emission trading system from 1st of January 2026. Design features are still not finalized, but we are waiting for conclusions in the not too distant future. So all in all, a pretty intense few years ahead of us, which is why I was extremely thrilled to be able to pre-record a conversation with with Foteini Ioannidou of the Waterborne in DG Move, part of the European Commission, where we explore some of the perspectives as seen from the European Union. Before we transition to that, though, I do want to again emphasize what Anna just said. Type your questions into the chat. We will have a discussion after the conversation. We'll try to get to as many as possible of those questions then, and we'll try to deal with the rest in the chat as we move along. Today we're lucky to have with us Foteini Ioannidou, Director of Waterborne at DG Move. She and her team are central to the European Commission's work on decarbonization of the maritime sector and have of course been instrumental to the work on MRV, ETS and Fuel EU Maritime. Foteini, welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. That's a very important event for us, and I understand there will be many people following it. So.
We certainly hope so. Thank you very much again. As I was mentioning in the previous segment, we are living in complex times. We have maritime and greenhouse gas regulations being developed and were already rolled out nationally, regionally, and internationally. Now, do you see the EU's ETS and Fuel EU maritime regulations evolving further beyond the plans we already know? And are there other potential EU initiatives on the table? I was thinking specifically maybe evolution of the ETD, the taxation directive, and elements like that?
Well, thank you for the question. Clearly, when it comes to EU ETS and Fuel EU Maritime, our real focus for the coming years will be to effectively implement these two regulations. They are complex. They are some kind of first in its kind for the sector. So our focus will be really the effective implementation. We will continue to work with industry, to support industry verifiers, but of course also national authorities in their efforts to comply with these regulations. And we will listen, as we are already doing, to their practical concerns and experiences regarding implementation. You know that both legislations foresee that the Commission will prepare a comprehensive report by 26 for ETS, 27 for Fuel EU. We are going to look at all relevant issues, taking into account what we have seen during the first years of implementation. We are going to look at their effectiveness, their environmental integrity, questions of administrative burden, their impacts on competitiveness, and this will be also the opportunity to develop proposals for concrete amendments to improve these regulations if needed. There are further measures that will be also coming up. Clearly, we have the IMO that is going to deliver, hopefully, an agreement by April this year. And in this context, we will also carry out the assessment of the complementarity with the global measures that IMO will have decided this year. And then we need as well to take them into account in case of amendment of this legislation. Further measures beyond regulations, but I can detail them further down as we discuss, is the support in terms of developing clean technologies and the production of clean fuels at scale and affordable prices. And there as well, we have, in particular, an initiative coming out this year called the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. But also we have other initiatives that are going to look at these questions of technologies, the EU Maritime Industrial Strategy and the EU Port Strategy.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mention that, because of course with the new commission there's been a renewed focus on competitiveness and an associated discussion on the regulatory burden, as you know, as demonstrated of course through that recent publication of the competitiveness compass, and that I guess also links to that transportation work you mentioned. But in the compass, the Commission states its intent to reduce reporting obligations for businesses by 25% and by 35% for SMEs. Do you see this having any implications for maritime and that those fairly complex reporting obligations that we're seeing under MRV, ETS, and FuelEU Maritime? I heard you mention that this will be part of reviews in 26-27, but do you think does this change the picture for these regulations on top of what already has been talked about in the media?
Indeed, in fact, the effort to reduce reporting obligations, in particular for SMEs, is really one of the priorities of this Commission's mandate. When we are looking at ETS and FuelEU, first of all, let's remind ourselves that they apply to ships above a certain size threshold, meaning that most SMEs within the maritime sector are not directly affected. I'm saying most. I'm not saying that it doesn't apply to SMEs. Looking at what we have done so far, when we were designing and also during the interinstitutional negotiation process, we have tried to streamline reporting requirements so as to minimize inconsistencies and duplications between MRV, ETS, and FuelEU to avoid decreasing complexity and cost. And in fact, we have continued these efforts through the development of secondary legislations, for example, to allow operators to use the same data while compiling the respective monitoring plans or reports for these regulations. Nevertheless, we acknowledge that further improvements are possible. For example, we have the definition of responsible entity that is different between ETS and FuelEU regulations. So it is clear, speaking to the on the question of responsible entity, that we need to determine what is the most effective approach, taking it also into consideration what IMO is going to deliver. And we will certainly, for this particular aspect and possibly other aspects, we will need to take a consistent view between the two legislations. As I said, we are going to tackle this and other issues during the scheduled evaluations of ETS and FuelEU. And our aim really is to achieve our objectives in the simplest and least burdensome way. So we have some way to go.
We'll try to have a bit of patience as well. So thank you for those comments. Since you're mentioning IMO, I think we can segue into MEPC 83 coming up now with a key intersessional negotiating session. Well, just around the corner, followed of course by MEPC 83 itself just before Easter. Now, I'm asking you maybe to look a bit into a crystal ball, and the simple question is, will we have an agreement on both technical and economic measures? And second part of it, what do you expect that to look like? It's a difficult one, I know, but I'm asking.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, you are asking me to look at the crystal ball. And it's not an easy reply. Indeed, we are very close to the finish line with the MEPC 83 in a few months. We have an important intersessional meeting in less than 2 weeks. From our perspective as EU, it is very important that we stick to the timeline agreed, that we will have an agreement on the basket of measures in April this year. And this is important because this will give the right signal to industry to invest in zero and near zero fuels. And that will allow us to have the energy transition as soon as possible and minimize the cost of this transition. On our side, together with EU member states, we have been engaging intensively in intersessional work. Maybe you have heard that we have submitted recently, together with another, in total we have 51 IMO delegations, including our, of course, 27 member states, and very, very big flag states. We have submitted a common proposal with variations on a greenhouse gas contribution levy as a component of the basket of measures. And clearly there is much work ahead of us. Time is really not much, but we remain confident that through continued cooperation amongst all IMO delegations, that we will have an agreement for a full package consisting both of a technical measure, a GHG fuel standard, and an economic measure by April this year. On our side, we will act constructively. It's important that IMO delivers this April, and in fact, they will have our full support. But we are really committed that this finally agreed basket of measures must deliver on all the goals of the revised GHG strategy that IMO has adopted.
I've read the proposal along with the rest, and I agree with you. There is a lot of work remaining ahead of us here to try to bridge the differences, and very little time. But fingers crossed. Now, just let's see. We're past the crystal ball perspective, and we have an agreement. We have an IMO agreement on international regulations, constructed to achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions similar to what the EU regulations are constructed to achieve, or maybe even more. Let's just take that as a given. We get to that point. You already mentioned the review efforts on the ETS and the FuelEU maritime and obligations there. In those review efforts, is alignment, sunsetting, are they even options from a realistic perspective? Or did you see those as any revisions leading to more tweaking rather than a potential sunsetting of those?
Yes, again, that's another difficult question, if I may say so. As I said already, both legislations include provisions that require us to assess in a report, the complementarity with global measures adopted at IMO. And this report will be accompanied or may be accompanied by legislative proposals to amend ETS and FuelEU. This will be a very important discussion because we would like to create alignment between EU and IMO measures to the extent possible. But it's very difficult to say. At this stage, we will have first to scrutinize the level of ambition, the scope, the enforceability, the integrity of the measures adopted by IMO before we can switch. So it's difficult to reply to your question. Again, for us, priority is now to have a sound and ambitious framework which will allow us to do after the adoption by IMO this work of alignment.
That's fair enough. I had to try though, but I hope you understand that. Okay, moving to our last question here. At the end of the day, the efforts to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency will of course matter and all that, but it does boil down to transitioning to other fuels, in essence creating a demand for alternatives. As of now, as we know, the available volumes of alternative fuels, they're not really even close to what we need and what we will be needing. So beyond regulatory efforts, can you say a little bit about what you in the EU are doing to encourage the very significant supply side increase on alternative fuels? Because this is really the crux of the transition from the industrial perspective, at least.
Yeah, and we fully agree with your analysis. Indeed, that's a crucial question, and we are doing already a number of things. I would like to mention our work in the context of the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuels Alliance. This is an industrial alliance that facilitates collaboration among key stakeholders, from financial institutions, manufacturers, member states, authorities, to accelerate the adoption of sustainable fuels. Coming out still this year, of course, you know that we have the Clean Industrial Deal. And in this context, we are going to present, I mentioned it very briefly, a sustainable transport investment plan, probably around summer or after the summer, that will provide an industrial strategy framework with roadmaps tailored for each mode of transport and fuel type. And it will discuss how we can expand EU funding mechanisms in order to make sure that the price gap between renewable and fossil fuels is closed, and also how production can be scaled up. And maritime fuels will be one of the main focus areas of this plan.
Thank you for that. And now I would have liked to hold you longer, but I do know that you have a very hectic life, so I will let you go with these questions. So in essence, there you have it, the key perspectives as seen from Brussels. I would like to thank you very much, Foutini, for taking the time to share your insights. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I hope that we'll have the opportunity to speak again very soon.
Of course, and thank you very much for the invitation again.